Are you ready for this? Alright, here we go. World premiere. World premiere of the Accidental Origin logo. Live on Twitch. Here goes. There we are. So, I'll leave it up on the screen a little bit, but this was a logo I commissioned from Marcus, aka the Red Network on Twitch, and it's fantastic, and I love it, and I've gotten a bunch of awesome compliments on it from different people. Expect to see this baby up on all my website and social media and all that within the next week. That should be good. But yeah, I have some other cool surprises to do with art to show off this week. So that's going to be an ongoing thing throughout the show. So yeah, I'm excited. I'm really excited. Super excited. I just hope my internet holds up. I've been having internet issues, but I'll get more into that later. Explain all that fun stuff. So yeah. Okay. Expecting hype. So much hype. All hype. Alright. So I'm gonna pop this bad boy up. I'm gonna shrink this fade back down to 300. Go like that. And I'll add another little thing here real quick. Just some text. Up. Awesome. So yeah, well, I'm gonna start the actual episode at a real time at 7 p.m. But I did want to kind of do a pre-stream logo show off, as it were. So yeah. I'm gonna go cool off a little bit. It's super hot in here. And yeah, be back in about 15.
take my time with it. I take forever, shit sick of working that clever. Let's skip ahead to the next, pushing my own limits. I make it better, ain't no one touching my future, ain't no one fuck with my old shit yet.
get lost? Leave the world behind with Discover Weekly.
All right, it's 7 o'clock. Let's get this baby started. All right. Boom. Okay, so yeah, let's start unveiling some overlays here. All right, hello and welcome all. This is Accidental Origin. My name is Brendan. I'm a writer. I run this show every week. Still working on my intro. I think that was better. Still working on it. I didn't stream last week. I was at a convention playing role-playing games and doing cool stuff. So that was unfortunate. It was the first week in like probably 2 months. And it was weird. It was super weird, and I missed it a lot. But because of that, there's gonna be exciting new things. So yeah, so I just revealed my logo. See it up there? Check out this bad boy. Yeah, that's right. There's only a few of these in existence for the people who loan me gear, mostly. But super excited. Today's episode is going to be on the elements of story. You can see that behind me. I'm still working on my lighting on the wall, so I'm not going to be using that today, but it is something I'm going to use a lot more in the future. It's really hard to light a reflective surface. It just is. So yeah. So yeah, I talked about last week. Things coming up. Over the next few months, I'm going to be doing a second weekly stream, which is going to be either Wednesdays or Thursdays from around 12 to 1:30, about an hour and a half. They're going to be a lot less structured. They're going to be fun things, experiments, seeds, studies, like writing studies, which I'm going to come back to. Stuff like that. It's going to be a lot more loosey-goosey. And I want to do that, A, so I can kind of build more of an audience, and B, because it'll be fun to stream something that's a little less structured. Because I love this show. I really like the way it's going. But it is a little, it's a lot of work to work on. So, yeah. So keep that coming up. I will be tweeting out all that stuff this week. And the first one I think is going to be Wednesday, I think. But again, I will tweet that out. So yeah, exciting new things. To start off today's show, I wanted to talk about some realizations that I've had over the last couple weeks, especially with the week off, and thinking a lot about writing and my approach to writing and the way that I want to do the show and some other things mixed into that. So to start off, I had a blast at the role-playing game convention. I'm going to be doing a design competition starting next Saturday. I won't let it affect the stream, but it's like a 10-day thing, and I'm going to be working super hard on it, which is really exciting. Because I did like a design seminar when I was at the con, and just been thinking about it for quite a few years. So that's an exciting opportunity for me, but it's also it's cool to get out of your shell and challenge yourself in that way. It's called it's called Game Chef. It starts on June 4th. It's a worldwide competition. Anyone can enter. It's kind of like a theme thing where they give you like some ingredients and a theme, and you gotta make something with that. Which I love those kind of restrictions. I'm cool with working within boundaries. And I've talked a lot to artists about stuff like that, where they almost feel, a lot of artists feel, they feel more free when they're hindered in those ways, because it allows you to sort of channel your creativity into specific things that are already set, which is an interesting concept. And something that I definitely understand. I mean, that's why we use writing prompts, right? And art prompts and all those kinds of things. It's a way of jogging our creative muscles. So yeah, that's exciting stuff I'm doing. I also wanted to talk a lot about, or at least a little bit about, things like being a professional writer and things like art, not visual art, but like the concept of art. I'm gonna delve a little bit more deep. I'm gonna delve a little more detailed into sort of art and craft and art versus craft at the start of the show, or the start of the content for the show today. But I wanted to also talk a little bit about sort of the idea of how I'm approaching writing from a personal and a professional standpoint. If you've been to the first stream and you've heard my bio and all that, I mean, I have a full-time job that's not writing, and that's awesome because it pays the bills, and it's good. Don't be a starving artist. It sucks. But I would like to write more, and I don't necessarily have time to do that as much as I would like. So that eats up my free time like mad, and that's cool because I love it, and I wouldn't give that up for sure. But it's a hard road, right? To get to a point where you can afford to just write. And I think the sort of approach to this show and the way that I'm coming at it is from an unprofessional standpoint. I've been studying writing for a long time, but I don't get paid to do it. So in a lot of ways, I'm like the viewers, right? Like I'm like people learning, and I love that aspect. I love connecting with people on that level. But I think for me, after the game design competition, I'm going to try and put myself out a lot more, push myself professionally, to accomplish things. And it's very likely, considering how much I'm enjoying doing the show and all that stuff, that if I could write professionally, I would stream a lot more, and that would be hella fun. So, yeah, there's all that. The other thing I was thinking about this week was I spend a lot of time hanging out with artists, visual artists, people who do illustration, people who do all kinds of like fantasy and fantasy art, sci-fi art, concept art, game cards, board games, those kinds of people, right? And I'm finding more and more as time goes on how similar those disciplines really are, and how writers almost need to take a lot more cues from artists. Just like artists should probably take a lot more cues from writers. The thing that, I was working on a short story this week, and I was kind of struggling with it. I couldn't find I couldn't find the character, like I couldn't find the purpose of the plot. I couldn't find the theme. I couldn't find the thing that would bring it all together. And that's fine, so I put it away for now, but then it was like, well, I need something to work on. Like I'm not gonna do nothing. I wanna create discipline and write every day and all those things. So what can I do right now? And I was watching some art streams, and it was like, you know what? I need to approach writing the same way that artists approach drawing, in which the stories that I work on are, in effect, the sort of the finished illustrations, the big guys, the guys you spend lots of time on. But when I'm not working on those illustrations, what I need to be doing is I need to be doing studies, working on anatomy, working on value. And then you're going to be like, well, Brendan, how can you work on anatomy and value as a writer? Writing doesn't have those things, and that's true. But, and here's what I was thinking, is a lot of people talk about having journals and stuff like that. So in effect, what those allow them to do is allows them to write on a subject for that day. And I think I need to approach writing a lot more like that, where I can sit down and just be like, here's a character, write a piece. It doesn't matter if it's good, it doesn't matter if it's bad, you don't have to come back to it. It just write something. Because your muscles will develop over time by doing that. And yeah, so like I'm trying to actually take a lot more cues from the other disciplines and learn stuff. And learn how I can improve my own process through those things. I mean, I talked about this in my creativity stream, where, you know, being multidisciplinary is a really good thing because it forces your mind to expand into areas you wouldn't necessarily expand. So yeah. Writing. Art. Fun times. Fun times. And with that, I'm going to transition into the first topic of today, which is art versus craft. Art versus craft is a extremely long debate that has been going on for hundreds and hundreds of years, specifically since the Renaissance. And the idea is, I'm gonna put forth the general, and I'm gonna make it really specific as it applies to writing, or as I've been taught it applies to writing. So, art is and this is why this episode is going to be really crazy, because it's going to be very conceptual. It's going to be a lot of terms, definitions, and concepts. I'm going to try and make them as concrete with examples as I can, but it is going to be a little as far as things go. But I totally missed the thing. The reason why I wanted to talk about these things today is because over the week, I realized that I was jumping immediately from brainstorming to plotting without really covering any of the little pieces that make up those parts. I hadn't considered that not everyone who's watching this is really going to be into writing as I am. Who has lived with concepts like narrative and concepts like genres in the same way that I have. So this episode is really going to be us establishing our terms. How are we going to talk about writing over the course of the show? And hopefully give us a working language so that we can move forward with those other parts of the story writing process. In a lot of ways, I mean, I'm reminded of Scott McCloud's Understanding Comics, where, you know, he breaks it down to as many and as small little pieces as he can and sort of builds this foundation. And I want to do the same thing. I want to build a foundation for us to properly discuss writing topics. So, yeah. And I'm going to take this off because there's no actual audio. Yeah, that's better. So yeah, what is art? From Wikipedia, art is a diverse range of human activities in creating visual, auditory, or performing artifacts, artworks, expressing the author's imaginative or technical skill, intending to be appreciated for their beauty or emotional power. That definition is extremely confusing in my opinion, but it is a definition and you need one to be a jumping off point. So for me, and I'm going to talk a lot about this in terms of my process and the way that I approach it, and there's no correct way to approach this stuff. And that's why we've been debating it for so long. But for me, art is about an emotional connection. It's about something that moves you, something that stimulates you intellectually, emotionally, like something that's beautiful, and beauty is in the eye of the beholder, right? So for me, that's art. And the interesting thing is, okay, so that's what art is. But how do you count, like, logos? How do you count advertising? How do you count newspapers? How do you count zines? How do you count, just thinking of examples off the top of my head. How do you count YouTube videos? How do you count all these other things that are part of disciplines that we consider art as a society? So that's where craft comes in. Craft is a pastime or a profession that requires particular skills and knowledge of skilled work. Comes from the Middle Ages. It has a lot to do with the idea of making goods, pottery, blankets, architects in a certain sense, stuff like that. So that's the broader definition of craft. But again, I'm going to break it down a little bit more into how I approach this. I mean, for me, craft is the technical skills. It's the knowing it's the knowing grammar. It's the knowing structure. It's the knowing, it's all those little technical bits that you learn in order to craft something, to make something. And the reason that art versus craft is such a huge debate is because where's the dividing line? Right? Where's the line between, like, if you make something and it emotionally connects with people, then is it art? But it's not something that we generally consider art. Is it craft? I don't know. But this discussion is extremely difficult, and I hope that I'm not going to be super confusing with the way that I'm approaching it. But I think it's a discussion that every artist sort of has with themselves. So the reason I bring this up is because I'm teaching the craft of writing. I'm teaching the skills, the technique, the technical aspects of being a writer. I'm not teaching art. I can barely define art. Never mind teach you how to be art, do art. So I'm going to teach you the craft. You have to bring the art. And you can take craft and make art. 100%, you can do it. And yeah, I'm always reminded of the examples that my professors used to use when I was in university of things like popular fiction. Popular fiction in the Victorian era was things like Charles Dickens, right? Someone who we consider a classic. But that was popular fiction at the time, and so it wasn't regarded as art until much later. Same with Shakespeare. Shakespeare was a playwright. You know, actors were lower class. Like, in a lot of ways, like, yeah, he was popular at the time, but he was popular, not because he was an artist, but because he was interesting to people, and popular fiction, you know, things like dime paperbacks and you know, Sherlock Holmes and Agatha Christie and all that stuff, genre fiction is all popular fiction, and this debate is important because, you know, a lot of stuff we consider art today was not art previously in the previous generations. And our definitions of this change all the time. And I realize that this makes this debate even more confusing because it's like, well, does that mean that logos are going to be the art of the future? The answer is maybe. But how you approach making art and doing your craft will change how your end product ends up. Yeah. You know, there's no right way to do art. There's no right way to write. I can't teach you how to move people. I can lead you along the path that will give you the skills so that you can make those connections and move people. But I mean, I guess the metaphor here is I can show you the door, but I can't open it for you. So yeah. I hope that simulated some sort of connection. But art is a hard thing, and it's a thing that I've kind of been struggling with. It's one of those things where as someone who's aiming to be a professional, you look at your work and you go, what am I trying to say? Am I saying anything? Like, personally, I want to be the type of writer like my heroes, like Scott McCloud and like Osamu Tezuka, the type of writer who can move people, who can inspire people. And I work towards that. I work towards that every day. And I'm not there yet. not in a long shot. So you know, I've worked a lot at the craft. I can do the craft, but the art is the hard part. And it will get there. It will. But that's the thing, right? And I hang out with a lot of artists, right? And those artists are extremely talented, extremely good at what they do. But approaching concept art and approaching certain other things is it's a different skill set. It's another beast, right? So yeah, art versus craft. Long running debate. In the episode resources for this week, I do have a video from a TEDx presenter talking about art versus craft and the long history of it. So you should check that out after. But yeah. So, the elements of story. We're going to start with terminology. Ugh, big word there. Terminology. We're going to define our terms. We're going to talk a little bit, or a lot of it, about writing. About the things surrounding writing. The things that define writing. And I'm not talking just about like a dictionary definition, but also things like form and medium and genre. Right? Which are things I haven't really broached, despite the fact that, it's like, oh, I'm writing a story, but I haven't explained to you what makes up a story, or, yeah. So I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna do that today, or I'm gonna attempt to do that today. I have a lot of content here, and I honestly am not sure if I'm gonna get all through it. So yeah. And I apologize to the chat. I get going and I just kind of go. And it's also one of those things where I kind of... It's a little weird for me to interact with chat. Not because I don't want to, but because it's like permanently saved in VODs and stuff forever, right? And I was just like, oh, are people going to think I'm weird? It'll like, ugh. Like, are they going to judge me? Like, what's going on? So I'm going to try and do better. Follow along. I am kind of following this debate. and I know your opinion on the matter, Sam, about how about how any debate is just a failure of definitions, or a failure of taxonomy, which is to say definitions. And I agree, but I also think in sort of a little bit higher concept of this thing. Anyway, sorry. I get derailed easily. I get derailed about derailing. Anyway. I'm gonna try harder. Don't worry, chat. I'm gonna try harder. Okay. So I'm gonna list off some things here. Storytellers, authors, screenwriters, dramaturgs, playwrights, poets, journalists, technical writers. These are all terms used to describe someone who writes. There's more. There's a lot more. And a lot of them are defined by a specific form or medium that they work in. But yeah, we have all these terms to describe a single discipline, and that fascinates me. It fascinates me that it can be broken up into so many little pieces, smaller and smaller chunks. And it's even more interesting to me, the concept of narrative. Now, Brendan, what is narrative? Well, basically, narrative is a story. It's a sequence of events. The cool thing about narrative is not just writing. A lot of scholars have used the term specifically only for literature, like the study of narratology and things like that. And I'm not going to talk about narratology like really at all because it is hella confusing. It's one of the most confusing things I've ever broached. And it's really weird for that. It's confusing. So I'm not going to get into it too much, but there is some very cool things that they bring to the table, for sure. But yeah, so narrative is not confined to writing. You can have narrative in film, in visual art, in nonfiction, in journalism, in games, role-playing games, casual games, Tag, Cops and Robbers. These all have narratives. They have a sequence of events. The sequence of events isn't always described when we're in the moment, but there is a sequence of events. So I'm going to go back to not to narratology. Narratology. I'm going to go back to Cops and Robbers. Cops and Robbers is a narrative. Somebody's the cop, somebody's the robber. That means that the robber stole something, and the cops grew up, went to police academy, got their badge, solved crimes. There's a backstory. There's an understood backstory when you play the game. Right? They go out and they do their jobs. There's a sequence of events there. And we're not talking about Scientology. We may talk about L. Ron Hubbard. No promises. I hope not, but no promises. We're not talking about that. So, I mean, the earliest form of narrative, or the earliest form most people are introduced to as a narrative, is oral storytelling. And I don't know if you've ever seen someone who professionally is an oral storyteller, but they are fantastic people to watch. Fantastic people. They're super engaging, and they know all these things about how to interact with an audience. And that's something I should totally look more into, so that I could be a better oral storyteller, be a better presenter. Engage more with my audience, because apparently I'm awful at it. Apparently, I'm awful at it. Just saying. Or they're just saying, I don't know, whatever. People are saying. So yeah. Narrative. And I use the word narrative a lot. Especially because I went to a convention. I played tons of role-playing games. I play a lot of video games. And how these mediums approach narrative are all different. There's similarities in the undertones, but they're very different in their execution. So yeah, that's narrative. So next, we're going to talk about mediums. Mediums come from visual art. More specifically, watercolors is a medium. Oil on canvas is a medium. Clay is a medium. These are the traditional forms of medium. But there are also mediums in writing. In terms of literature and scholarly discourse, if I can pronounce things, scholarly discourse, mediums are called forms. Major forms, classical forms, they're generally called forms. And I'm going to call them mediums throughout because I just think it's easier. It's a much easier term to understand. So, yeah, totally going to do that. But for us, there's there's two sets of binary categories that define the major jumping off points for writing mediums. The first one being fiction and nonfiction. So fiction being something made up, embellished, or presented in a more storytelling way. Nonfiction being more informational, educational, less of a story, but still a narrative. and see, this is writing terms, man. Writing terms. So yeah, there's fiction and nonfiction, and then there's prose and poetry. Poetry being verse, like not full sentences, not full ideas, very condensed thoughts. It's all kind of packed in as much as possible. Prose being, your general novel. And then, yeah. So those are your like two sets of two. The major breaking off points. But we can narrow that down even further, right? We can keep going down. So the major forms for literature are the novel, the short story, and drama. So those are the three major forms of literature. But the other major forms of writing, at least as I consider them, are the comic book and the screenplay. In terms of, these are all prose sort of things, right? Though scripting, like comic book and screenplay, use a lot of things from both. Because you'll describe action and all that in prose, but there's a lot of shorthand and terminology and things that create a more poetry-like aspect to screenplay. And I totally agree. I mean, humans do take endless arrays of data and try and assign meaning, whether there is one or not. We're talking about the infinitesimal nature of pi, and that's the whole point of the movie Pi, right? 1998, Pi. About something that describes humanity, God, with a number, with cracking a sequence. And in a lot of ways, my pursuit of writing is trying to crack that sequence, to find the thing that affects all of us, that affects me, that affects my readers, that moves us, right? Something with meaning. So then, the last thing I'm going to talk about in this first section is genre. And genre is super annoying because the first usage of genre is actually a synonym for forms, and I hate it when people do that because it's super annoying, because it just makes things so much more confusing. But genres are determined by narrative technique, tone, content, and by critics and popular definitions of them. So basically, they can be anything. There tends to be rather permanent ones that have lasted for a long time, but there are so many subgenres, tons of them in fact. So yeah, I'm gonna go to my main screen here. Look at this bad boy, new overlay. I'm loving life right now. And I have this prepared. A couple things here. Writing genres. So these are the major ones: comedy, drama, nonfiction, realistic fiction, romance, satire, tragedy, tragicomedy, and horror. These are kind of the ones that have been passed down for generations upon generations of storytellers. Starting with Aristotle, with just comedy and drama, or comedy and tragedy. and then moving up through Shakespeare and all that, and more Elizabethan, where you get more of the tragicomedies, and different types of plays. So these are the old school ones, the classic examples. But we'll flip down here a little bit more. Common fiction genres. Look how long that list is. You got mythology, you got science fiction, you got westerns, magic realism, which I consider kind of a subgenre and not a main genre, but subgenres are still genres, right? Yeah, fantasy, fairy tales, fables, crime novels, graphic novels. These are genres. Genre fiction, I've referred to it several times throughout this show, but genre fiction, to me, or at least the way that I understand it, specifically applies to speculative fiction, which is fantasy, sci-fi, and horror, detective novels, and fantasy, sci-fi, horror, detective novels, and on a slightly different but kind of the same note, superhero stories are what I consider, or what I've talked about with professors and all that as being the main forms of popular fiction and genre fiction. So yeah, genre. And I have there's nonfiction genres, journalism, textbooks, essays, biographies, memoirs, reference, self-help, all that stuff. I mean, look at this list of genres. This is everything. And the subgenres break it down even further, right? I mean, when we talk about subgenres, let's click on fantasy here. Yeah, look at this. Look at this. Genres. You can break up crime genres into courtroom, detective, gangster, gentleman thief, hardball detective, noir, legal, murder mystery. There are hundreds upon hundreds of genres of that people write in, and there are communities surrounding each of these little genres. I know a whole there's even some that have almost taken on a life of their own. I think of things like steampunk, vampire fiction, as being vampire fiction as being different from supernatural fiction. Myths and fables are their own thing. Sword and sorcery is a thing. I'm a big fan of low fantasy, though it's not very common. The most famous example being Conan the Barbarian. Compared to the high fantasy subgenre of Lord of the Rings, for example. The Quantum Thief is my current favorite Gentleman Thief novel. Nice. My favorite Gentleman Thief novel is The Stainless Steel Rat by Harry Harrison. So, just putting that out there. Right? And then YA is kind of an interesting thing because YA is its own subgenre within all of the other genres. Right? Like there's YA fantasy, there's YA science fiction that are different from just regular fantasy and science fiction, but are different again from themselves within YA. YA standing for young adult, for those who don't know. It tends to be teen fiction, but a lot of different people read them, and quite a few of the more popular blockbusters over the last little while. And I know people are aware of this, but I'm just putting it out there. Like Twilight and The Hunger Games and what was that other one? The Knowing? Was that it? Was that it? No, The Host. Sorry. The Host. I think that was a Stephanie Meyer book, if I'm not mistaken. The Host, that one with Shailene Woodley, whose name I can't remember right now. Divergent, that one. Those are all YA novels that have been adapted into to film series. I love Sin City. Frank Miller. I really like Sin City. Frank Miller has done some really cool stuff in science fiction that no one talks about ever because he's known for Sin City and 300. And it's just one of those things, man. It's just one of those things. I do love Humphrey Bogart, man. Humphrey Bogart being the kind of quintessential noir actor of the quintessential noir film, The Maltese Falcon, among others. Yeah, because then the Maltese Falcon and all that is like a hard-boiled detective, but it's done in this really unique style. What sci-fi did Frank Miller do? Frank Miller did a really cool science fiction book called... What was it called? I'm just looking at Frank Miller right now because I can't remember what it was called. It was called Ronin. It was really cool. Pull it up here. Oh, right, this is Firefox. Ronin. Yeah, man. This is live. I just make it up as I go. I Google the shit out of it. So this is Ronin. Ronin was really, really cool. It's considered cyberpunk. Cyberpunk being a style of dystopian science fiction. Not the only style, a subgenre of a subgenre. Think about that one. Subgenres of subgenres. All the time. Every day. So yeah, I was a big fan of this. What was the other one? I thought there was another one. Give me 1 second here. I'll find it. I know it's here. I think it was this one. Yeah, this one was really cool too. In it, Carl Seltz, an insurance investigator, discovers he's also a homicidal cyborg tax collector who happens to be the last hope of an enslaved robot race. Bam. That's something. Yep. And then virtual reality is a subgenre of science fiction as well, where you find things like The Matrix. And the movie that The Matrix is based on, what was that one called? God, I'm having the hardest time remembering things. It was called... jeez. Body something? It starred the guy from Evil Dead, who I feel bad for not remembering because I love him, and I am having a hard time with this. Bruce Campbell. Bruce Campbell's in it. It was called... Where is it here? How can I remember this? It's from the 80s. No, it wasn't that one. I can't believe I can't remember. Oh yeah, it's this one, Mind Warp. And that's what makes The Evil Dead so good, is that it doesn't take itself seriously. I mean, it's almost a satire of itself. In fact, Evil Dead 2 was literally a satire of itself. And that is something that's vastly underappreciated. It's really hard. It's really, really hard to act like a bad actor. Like, it's really hard. Because if you're a bad actor, you're just going to look like a normal actor. Or like a mediocre actor at best. Like, it's this weird mind twist thing. And I do agree that the Evil Dead show was a masterpiece. It was fantastic. It was absolutely fantastic. Yeah, that's all I'm gonna say about it. It was brilliant. I enjoyed every episode. It was wonderfully shot, really cool stuff. The effects were great. They didn't feel too hokey, or they felt hokey in the right ways. Like they were purposely hokey, and then they took it like another step further to be like beyond hokey, but like because they're that hokey, they were amazing. But yeah, I love that show. I can't wait for the second season. There's supposed to be a second season. Can't wait. Can't wait. Thanks, Johnny. I love this logo. It's really cool. It's really cool. All right. So that's all the content for part 1. And it is my break time, and I am sweating like a pig. Because it is 31 degrees in Ottawa right now, and the humidity index is super high, and I'm like dying. There's lights, and oh my god. Oh my god. So yeah. Oh yeah, one last thought, because we're discussing it. The coolest part about The Evil Dead is they edit badly on purpose, and it actually makes it better that they do that. Yeah, and there's that great story of Bruce Campbell starting choking on fake blood at one point, and he's like, no. They're like, do you want to stop? He's like, no, just keep shooting. It's perfect. And like he's like driving the car, he's like fighting the zombie, and he's like choking, and it's like it looks amazing on screen. But yeah, the editing is bad, but it's purposely bad. And I know it's purposely bad because it actually takes effort to be that bad. Unlike when you watch something like, if you watch Bones has the coolest characters ever, and their interactions are fantastic. Like that's where that show nails. Like it's so good at that. But it's very, very poorly directed, edited, and produced. Like it's not good. It's not good. It treats its viewers like they don't follow the seasons. Like it's really weird. But it's badly edited and it looks bad. Because it's badly edited. There we go. But The Evil Dead is actually purposely bad and looks better because it's purposely bad. Because they just pull it into their own camp even more. So yeah. Anyway, break time. Going to break. Check this stuff out. And we're coming back. Alright. Let's go to this one. There we go. Cool. I'm back. It's really weird because this room looks so much better mirrored, but it annoys the hell out of me that all my text is backwards. But that's okay. I don't know, I put those back on. Yeah. Alright. How we doing? How we doing? Scrolling up there. Okay. So, now we're going to dive into the elements of story. Now that I've spent an hour talking about writing and really saying nothing. As with all good debates. So there are 5 main elements of a story. 4 of those are pretty much no contest. Everyone agrees those are the 4. The 5th one gets debated a lot, and we'll talk a little bit about that. I went with the one that I've always been taught was the 5th one, and a lot of people agree that it is the 5th one, but it is still a matter of debate. And yeah, new haircut, went to my other pair of glasses, cool new shirt. Had to do a thing, had to do a thing. So yeah, I've written out like a whole section. It's like 2 pages just for these 5 things, and then like a whole other thing on like the potential 5th one. I don't know if I'll have time to go through all of it. Hopefully I will. If not, we'll continue next week. But I think I'll be okay. The one thing I did want to say about that is there are a lot of smaller ideas within the 5 concepts that I won't be explaining today, which is unfortunate because I wanted to, but I really don't think I'm going to have time. But that's fine because those are going to make up the basis of other episodes. I'm like, yeah, I've already done half my planning for the next 6 episodes. Yeah. I can just pull them out and plug them in. Yeah. So I'll list them off and then I'll explain them a little bit broader. So the 5 elements of story or storytelling are character, setting, conflict, plot, and theme. So I'll repeat those. Character, setting, conflict, plot, and theme. And let's be honest, all my episodes are shenanigans. Just saying. So, what is a character? Chat, what is a character? Tell me what a character is. Oh, right. I forgot to point it out. So the lovely Drawny, who was in chat, told me in episode 1 that I should totally make a t-shirt with stuff I said on it. So, logo. And you can't read that. Good job, Bureau. Good job. Go back to this one. How's that, Drawny? Yeah. And I totally forgot that I was going to shout out that. So, there you go. Shout it out. Yeah, deal, Sam, deal. I know, but whatever. It was a trial run. It was a trial run. So, yeah. It is so hot. I'm sorry. It's so hot. So what is a character? Chat, tell me what a character is. And not Sam. Sam's not a character. Unless I make him a character. But he's not right now. Come on, chat. You can do it. Oh, I forgot about the other thing. To show off the other cool thing. One sec. So these are our business cards for the channel. They have the logo on the back, and then they have stupid mirroring. They have like the channel and just like a little detail, and then like the website and stuff, and my name. So yeah, we giving out these to random people. Super love these. They're awesome. And very useful marketing tool, by the way. So, I finally got someone answering my question. What is a character? Johnny says, character, a human or non-human being that shows features that make them unique and special. Kind of. It's actually way more general than that. I'm not going to change it again. It's fine. So it's a character is a person, animal, or thing who takes part in the action of a short story or other literary work. So they don't need to be unique or special. I mean, not all characters are unique or special. And the reason for that is because you're thinking of a protagonist or an antagonist. There are also romantic interests, supporting characters, minor characters, throwaway characters. There's lots of other... there's lots of types of characters, and not all of them are special. Like a waiter, a waiter can be special, but when your two main characters are sitting down on their date, the waiter doesn't really matter unless he causes something to happen in the dramatic event, in the plot. But yeah, they don't have to be unique or special. They're basically just someone who's there. And the reason I break it down into animal or thing as well is because of things like Chekhov's gun. Being Anton Chekhov, the famous Russian short story writer, Chekhov's gun being a something that was mentioned earlier on that you know is going to be important later. And those things can be characters. I think of the Dukes of Hazzard. That car is like a character. Even though it doesn't speak or interact in those ways, it's a character. It's part of their show and their relationships and everything. Like, that's totally a thing. Right? And then, you have animals. I watched Zootopia last night. Every character's an animal. I mean, they're personified. They have human-like traits, but they all animals. And Robin is correct. Never introduce a gun if you're not going to use it. People will be pissed. They will. That being said, if you use the gun to distract somebody else from something else, that counts as a correct use. Just saying. So yeah. I also watched The Hateful Eight last night, or the rest of it. Fantastic film. I went out. I bought the screenplay today. They had it all in the bookstore. I was like, oh yes, because it's the actual screenplay. It's not the shooting script. I don't know if anyone else here like buys screenplays in general, but most of the time they're the shooting scripts, and that's cool. But the shooting script tends to be almost exactly what's filmed on the page. It's much more interesting to see the original script and where they made changes. So yeah, totally. Much cooler to read the original script. That being said, Quentin Tarantino writes and directs his own movies, and writer directors tend to be a little better about things like that. They don't need a shooting script because they have a vision of it in their head and they don't like it. It's fine. The other issue with shooting scripts is shooting scripts tend to have a lot of camera details in them, and that's a huge faux pas in screenwriting. Like that's a huge faux pas, because that's the director's job, right? So it doesn't really give you a good idea what a real screenplay is supposed to look like, and it kind of ruins the flow of the original writing. That being said, again, weird example is Quentin Tarantino, because he's a writer-director, puts camera things in his script. Not a ton, but he includes specific types of shots that he wants. And that's perfectly acceptable. Because he's established and because he's directing his own films and all that. And you can do it to a certain extent where it's applicable. Like if you need a certain close-up or something in order to dramatically tell something, it can be done. But in general, yeah, super great film. I really liked it. I do kind of have a problem with Tarantino's dialogue because it feels very manufactured to me, which sucks. But at the same time, it has so many great moments of just cool circularity and reference and stuff that make it worthwhile. But his cinematographer in that film is astoundingly good. There's so many great framing shots, and there's this awesome. I don't know if anyone else knows it, but there's like wooden tables, and there's a couple of them in the film, and every time a character is sitting down at one, there's like a golden halo shining down on the table, and I love it. The first time you kind of see it is actually when one of the characters is reading a letter, and it's so good because like it's almost like shining on this letter. Fantastic. But yeah, back to the 5 elements of story. Chat derails me yet again. So I actually came up with a whole series of examples for talking about these things. So I'm going to go back to this screen. And I prepared most of them. The ones that are very visual, I prepared. So the first one here. Look at this. The Oscars. Yay! I don't like the Oscars. But you know, that's the thing. It's just because it's kind of like an old boys club. But we won't get into that. The thing I wanted to point out here was kind of a lot of what I was saying, that there's different types of characters, right? I mean, the Oscars literally break it up in saying these are lead characters, these are supporting characters. And the distinction can get weird sometimes, for sure. But in general, yeah, like this is a straight up breakup. You know, Leonardo DiCaprio was the lead character in The Revenant. You know, he was the protagonist. Often the antagonist is a supporting actor. It depends how much they appear in the film. And again, it's one of those weird, like, loosey-goosey rules. But yeah. I want to do the reaction. I like doing it live. My perfectionism streak would ruin me on YouTube. I would totally like. I would totally spend hours upon hours trying to get shots and words and retakes and stuff, and it would be awful. It would ruin me. It would ruin me. But yeah. So this is a great example of what I was talking about, different types of characters. You know, actors in lead role, actors in supporting role. They're distinct. They're different. So the second one is setting. So what is a setting? A setting is a time and a place in which a story happens. Time and place in which a story happens. Setting matters. Where you set something changes everything. It changes how your characters talk. It changes their motivations. It changes how people perceive their motivations. It changes the technology they have access to. It changes the building aesthetics. It changes the clothing aesthetics. It changes haircuts. It changes everything. Setting, you know, it's about world building. It's about creating a milieu for a story. And as someone who deals a lot in genre fiction, setting is super important. I mean, setting is almost literally the whole thing of like Lord of the Rings or high fantasy. And not almost literally, like it is. It's the thing. And setting is super difficult. It really is. It's so easy to ignore in favor of so many other things. Yeah. And that's super interesting, Sam. About there's an article in Analog about how ridiculous it is that people ask, "What's your story about?" And I agree. The funny, you know what's even more interesting to me about that question is they ask, "What's your story about?" and they mean, "What is the plot?" But arguably, funnily enough, we right now, or at least because of Hollywood in the last 100 years or so, we really like character-driven stories. So they ask, "What's their story about?" looking for a plot, but really it's how good the character is that makes it interesting within the world that they're given, because your character is really defined by your setting. So it does go back to world building, but it's really one of those things, right? Like it's kind of weird. It's kind of weird. And we're going to come back to that when we get to theme. Challenge my thinking, see Ready Player One. That's by Cory Doctorow, right? I haven't read that. I've been meaning to read it for a long time. Oh yeah, and that was the other thing I wanted to approach. I want to impart this idea on my audience that this show is about writing, but it's not just for writers. It's for people who are interested in writing. It's for people who work in those other narrative fields. I want to impart ideas like backstory, like setting, like character, and how those things help inform things like art. I gotta read Red Shirts. That is true. Red Shirts sounds fantastically amazing. Like, my friend, John Derek Murphy, Twitch streamer John Derek Murphy. And let's see if this works. I think this works. I might have to set this up. Nope, doesn't work. Okay, never mind. But my good friend John Derek Murphy, I was breaking down sort of a series of tests he did for Games Workshop in which I analyzed the narrative content of his images. And I think narrative is super important when it comes to illustration. Not necessarily concept art, but just in general. Where, you know, these characters didn't appear out of nowhere. They didn't just suddenly spring into existence. They have something that formed them. And that's setting, really. You know, and how you make those decisions in your art and in your writing, like your visual art or your writing, will influence how your character appears on the page. I have examples. I opened up a bunch of stuff here. I don't know what this is. This is an environment. You have a culture. They're obviously native influenced. They look a little bit more Inuit to me than Native American. There's a little like influx of snow and like the way that they're dressed. But these characters have a story. We don't know what the story is because it's an image, but they have a story. There's a reason they're there. There's a reason that they are who they are. There's a reason their world has developed the way it has. Right? Knowing how your character exists, how he came to be, and we're going to do a lot more in-depth stuff with characters, but in a later episode, probably 2 or 3 episodes from now. But how you construct this image based on those backstories and those ideas will change your image. You know, I hang out with a lot of artists, and I've seen them where they're like, oh, this just looks cool, let's put it in. And it's just like, well, no. Why is that there? How does it change their character? What makes them interesting? I've seen Jonah Loeb, who's a really cool artist and modeler here on Twitch as well, who did work for Skyrim and stuff like that, where he talks about how to give your character's personality. And that's exactly what I'm talking about. That personality is not born out of nowhere. There's a story that gave them that personality. And you don't have to write that story down, but it is something that you can explore in order to create better images. And this was the example I designed, or I came up with for setting, was concept art. I mean, this is what concept art does. It's supposed to give you ideas of what a place is like and give you variations and make informed decisions about why those things are there. So I have like this hover bike. This is really cool. You got some different drawings about how the engine could work, or the dock module that's there. You got VTOLs, different types of VTOLs from different countries. Why are they different? Why is this top one really sleek? Why is this one really fat? Like, there's informed decisions there. I got air cars, right? And different variants and perspectives on air cars to show a design. And I just found this guy today, and I think he's really cool. Dmitry Popov. A lot of really cool concept art. But yeah, a society that has these air cars is going to be different than a society that has regular cars. Not necessarily noticeable differences on the surface, but there are going to be differences. And how those characters interact with those things changes that. So yeah. Just catching up on chat here, because obviously I just ignore chat all the time. I've not seen the Deus Ex trailer. I expect it's cool. I'm a big fan of Miyazaki, though Miyazaki's super interesting because all of his works are adaptations, or most of them, which no one really talks about ever. But it's interesting. Oh, cool. Link that to me, Sam, and I'll check it out later. For sure. For sure. I do really gotta read Peter Watts. I know you recommend him to me all the time, and I never have gotten around to it. I will get there eventually. I promise. Promise. I'm not gonna do it. I promise. No, I will. I will. So yeah. Jeez, it's already been half an hour? Man. Time flies. Time flies. So the third element is plot. So a plot is a series of events and character actions that relate to the central conflict. Plots are super interesting. Plots are generally the framework of a story. There's a lot of other things. There's subplots. Other plots that interweave with the main plot, which tends to be things like the romantic interest, the buddy character, certain things like that. Plot points, turning points, things that cause the characters to change in their dramatic need. And I'm going to talk a lot more about dramatic needs and stuff like that next week when I get to outlining. But yeah. There's a lot to that. And for this example, I don't have a visual example, unfortunately. But there are... the example I thought of, because I've kind of picked a different discipline for each category. So this one is drama. I think of Shakespearean plays with a 5-act plot structure, where your climax is always in Act 3, and your resolution is in Act 5, and there's like things in between, and they're set up very similarly across all of his plays. That's the 5-act plot structure, and Aristotle talks about 3-act and 5-act plot structures. So yeah. And I realize that not every single one of Miyazaki's movies is an adaptation. That was a hyperbole. I apologize. Hyperbole being a gross exaggeration. But there are quite a few of his more well-known ones, which are adaptations. The answer, yes. On Top of Poppy Hill is an adaptation. So is Grave of the Firefly. So is Howl's Moving Castle. Arietta and the whatever that one was called is an adaptation. They did the Dragon Sea movie, or sorry, not Dragon Sea. The Ursula Le Guin book. Earthsea. That's the one. No. Those movies, all the ones I just named, are actually based on books. They're based on physical books, and most of them are not Japanese, funnily enough. But yeah. So yeah. Well, fine. It's Ghibli. I apologize. It was Ghibli. Yeah, it's Arrietty. My bad. Which is based on The Borrowers, which is a very famous book. Yeah, well, if Earthsea is his son, he's still a Miyazaki. Still correct. Just saying. So the fourth element is conflict. Conflict is arguably the most important element. Sid Field swears by conflict. Which I'll talk about when I get to the book club. But a conflict is a struggle between two people or things. At a minimum. It's not necessarily just two people or two things, but at a minimum. So, conflict. Conflicts, there are basically two types of conflict. There's external conflict and internal conflict. Internal conflict is really only shown in one form, and it's man versus self. Because self encompasses all that is you. The external conflicts are like man versus man, you versus another person, man versus society, you versus your society trying to change things, man versus nature, all those like cool movies where people go out into the middle of nowhere and try and survive, or disaster films, man versus nature. I'm trying to think of some other stuff. No, those are the main three. Those are the main three, and you can define most conflict by those four things I just named. Obviously, they get more specific as you go, but conflict is what drives the plot of a story. How events happen through the conflict and characters' actions as reactions to the conflict in the story. If you don't have conflict, you don't have a story. And it doesn't have to be necessarily like a bad guy punching thing. Like, and I know that's all, like, people say conflict. Oh, it's an argument, it's a fight. Not necessarily. It doesn't have to be. So yeah, a lot of this influences character relationships with the setting, their dramatic wants, their dramatic needs. There's so much to how the conflict influences everything, right? And a good conflict, like if you have a bad conflict, people are going to point it out. They're going to notice really early. And it's kind of easy to spot. And it'll make your story weaker overall. So always, have a good conflict. It's what's going to drive everything your character does for the entirety of the story. And it's going to drive the plot and all those things. So, yeah. Conflict. Like the conflict happening in my chat right now. Yeah. So the example for this one I have here. Boom. Dungeons and Dragons. Yay, because I'm a nerd. Role-playing games are a great example of conflict-driven storytelling. Because it's literally, like, well, I mean, we're going to use a very stereotypical, traditional example here. But it's literally, I have a quest, I gotta kill things in a dungeon. Get the treasure and get back out, sort of thing. Like, that's literal conflict. Like, we're gonna fight the entire way through. But then there are other types of role-playing games, like Fiasco, like Microscope, where you build relationships between characters and how those characters interact, and it changes how the plot of the story within your group goes. And in one of my experiment streams, or sorry, not in one of my experiment streams, on my birthday stream, which will be in July, I'm gonna do some live role playing with some of my friends on stream, and we're gonna talk about storytelling in terms of role playing, and in terms of character relationships and interactions and stuff like that. It should be good. It should be good. I think I have enough friends that I can do 2 groups, so I might do like a few hours with one and a few hours with another. We'll see how it goes. I'm still planning that guy, but yeah. Eclipse Phase, fantastic role playing game. Crazy transhumanism. Transhumanism is a fascinating concept. So yeah, that's totally a thing. HeroQuest is cool. Is that a picture of HeroQuest? I didn't know. I don't know. It said Dungeons and Dragons on it. I just assumed it was Dungeons and Dragons. But yeah, I mean, role-playing, great. Like, role-playing is all about conflict and how characters interact. That's why it's role-playing. So yeah. Then the last one, theme. Theme is the central idea or belief in a story. It's kind of what the story's about. Which is why when Sam was talking about that article in Analog, it's kind of funny because people always ask what's the story about, and it's always like, oh, it's about life and death and art, blah blah blah. But they don't really care about that. They want the other things. They want the other things. But yeah, theme is important. Theme is what I was kind of struggling with my last short story, because it didn't have a purpose, other than me thinking I'm clever, which is not a good purpose at all for telling a story. So yeah, themes are actually a big part of what make up music, especially cinematic music, but but mostly opera. And I totally should have brought up opera pictures. That should have happened. So we're gonna pull out one up here. Yes, Das Rheingold. Wagner. I love Wagner. Wagner's a cool guy. Boom. Opera. That's a horrible television thing from one of the things. I'm dying from the heat, man. It's crazy. Crazy. I'll introduce people after the stream, don't worry. So, opera is super big for thematic things. La Boheme is one of the most famous operas in recent times, particularly because it's the inspiration for Rent, the musical, the movie, the phenomenon. Yeah. Make fun of my German accent. It's fine. It's fine. I said it's fine. So, opera is super interesting, especially Wagnerian opera, because he is super good at using themes and motifs as part of the staging of the opera. He uses them, like, every time an item is mentioned, there's a motif. Every time a character enters a scene, there's a theme. He uses them to tell his stories really, really well. And that's exactly the same as how we're going to use theme. It's an idea to give us some sort of meaning, to give us not necessarily a lesson, but for us to take something away from a story. And themes tend to be very broad, about very broad things, but they can be very specific. If you remember me talking about it last week, or was it the week before? Last week, I think. Oh, well, obviously it was the week before, but I meant last episode. Where creating a story based on a theme can be kind of weak, and it can, because you tend to end up very preachy. But the best way to approach theme is to set up your conflicts, set up your characters, and your themes will fill out regardless. It's good to know your themes, because then you can tweak things in order to play with those themes. But you can build the themes afterwards. They'll build out of your conflicts. They'll build out of your characters and the way they deal with things. So yeah, theme. So the last kind of concept and kind of the... Oh, well, I guess I'll mention it. The other main... the other contender for the 5th spot in the 5 elements of story is mostly resolution, which I don't really like, because resolutions are very important, but they're part of plot and conflict. It's not really a separate thing, in my opinion. That being said, resolutions are super important to plotting and outlining. So I will be talking about resolution a lot more next week, for sure. So the last thing I want to talk about is point of view and narration. Yeah. So often abbreviated as POV, point of view, it is used in a lot of different ways, but we're specifically going to talk about it in terms of narrative voice, literary point of view, narrative point of view. So, what does that mean, Brendan? What is a narrative point of view? Well, basically, it's the types of language we're using to tell the story. It gives us a sort of metric for the way that the author is going to interact with the reader. So there's 3 main types of point of view, though most people split it up into 4, because the third one is really 2 main things. But 3 main types. So the first one, so there's first person, second person, and third person. Third person tends to be broken up into limited and omniscient. And I'll break those down in a few minutes, because I have 15 minutes to get through this section or so. Probably more like 10, but 15 minutes. So a first person narrative is told from the perspective of a character in the story. You use the forms I and we to tell it. It's a way of conveying internal thoughts very well. So it works well in those kinds of stories that have a lot of internal things. It feels very natural for that. Second person is really weird. Second person is the least used form by 4, and there's actually 2 versions of second person. There's second person that's used in a couple of different authors who I haven't read, so I can't really speak about them. But it's very alienating using that kind of second person. The other version of second person is the one that's used in Choose Your Own Adventure and Final Fantasy books. I'm a huge fan of Steve Jackson, the way he designed games. But yeah, Steve Jackson, Final Fantasy, they use you because they're sort of interacting with the reader in terms of it's like, you're doing this, you're doing that. Our group is doing this. It's a way of interacting with the reader. Fan fiction does it a lot. There's a ton of fanfics that I never read because I don't like it. I don't like self-insertion in that way. I like self-insertion in other ways. I'm just kidding. I'm talking about Mary Sue's. But, yeah, it's a way of making the reader part of the story with that kind of you. The other kind of you is really weird because the way that I understand it as it was used, it's kind of used in this weird way of being like a character is talking to himself in the second person, and it's messed up. Yeah, well, see, yeah, I mean, second person is the hardest one, and it's really dumb, and almost never used. I'll find an example real quick, because I should have a thing open. No, I don't. I do not. I will do that. Okay. Yeah, so we're highlight here. Second person narrative. Prominent example. Yeah, I know. It's just because it's hard. It's hard to describe second person. It's really weird. So in the novel Bright Lights Big City by Jay McInerney, the second person narrator is observing his own out of control life, unable to cope with the trauma he keeps hidden from readers for most of the book, the death of his mother's. And he talks to himself in the second person. So he uses you. You are not the kind of guy who would be at a place like this time in the morning, but here you are, and you cannot say the terrain is entirely unfamiliar, although the details are fuzzy. He's talking to himself. And I understand how that could easily be alienating. So, I don't know. I don't like it. I don't like it. I'm sure it's a cool concept. It's not really my thing. Though I do have some cool ideas when we get to kind of the end of this topic. So we'll skip over second person for now. Don't do it. It's easier just not to do it. Trust me. Third person. Third person is someone outside of the story. Though it can be it's usually someone outside the story, but can be someone inside the story. And they refer to the characters as he, she, or it, and they. Yeah. So it's like it's the traditional most used style. Harry went to the store. He bought a bag of groceries. He came home. See, Harry. He. I'm referring to the character. It can be someone in the story. The most famous example... no, wait. I'm wrong. That's first person. Never mind. It can be someone in the story. The easiest way to do someone in the story in third person is through third person limited. It's called limited because... we generally only see the internals of one character versus omniscient, which you see the internals of all the characters. most writers consider Omniscient to be bad form because it's way too confusing to the reader to keep track of thoughts. That's not to say it can't be done, and it's certainly easier than second person, but it is hard. It's hard to do well. So yeah, that's the whole thing. There was a thing. What was the thing? I was thinking of a thing. Sorry. Yeah. So again, there's kind of this other inflection of third person where it's third person subjective and third person objective. They have a lot of similarities to Omniscient versus Limited, but they aren't exactly the same. Subjective tends to be things that are colored towards the character, versus objective, which are like very, very neutral. Well, here's the example. In a lot of ways, this is how the author interacts with the reader, right? So in my example of Harry went to the store, excuse me, frog in my throat. Harry went to the store. That's a very objective statement. He went to the store. It's neutral. There's nothing. But I could easily change that as the narrator and say something like, slovenly Harry went to the store. That's a whole different thing. And while that can be objective, it's really not. It's kind of subjective. I'm creating a character aspect of him being sloven, a sloth, lazy. Right? So those are different ways that you can approach third person. There is a precedent for hybrids. And this is what I was talking about when I was talking about cool ideas. I'm really intrigued by a hybrid, like, first, second person book. And hybrids can be really neat. I've seen a few where like they'll do third person for the main parts of the story, but then when it flips to certain characters, it'll be in first person to give you like internal perspective on those characters. There's a few that do it like they have like one first person chapter in the entire book, which can be weird, like can be jarring. But at the same time, if it really communicates what you're trying to get across in that scene, can be very effective. That is Blindsight. I gotta read Blindsight then. I've been meaning to read it forever. But yeah, like I'm intrigued by ideas of like mixing persons. We'll talk about it after, Sam. We will. So yeah, there are hybrids, and you can do interesting things with that. So yeah, cool. It's 5 to 9. So I'm gonna take a 5-minute break, and then I'm gonna come back and do like kind of the close up of the show. We'll do a close up. We'll have Q&A. So ready your questions. If you want me to re-explain second person, I will. I'll try my best. It's difficult. But yeah, we're going to go to a break. All right. And we're back. All right. My hair looks weird. Oh. Sure. That's. Yeah. Okay. So, yeah. So, as I always end my show with, it's now time for the Accidental Book Club. This week we are reading Syd Field's screenplay. Yay! Yay! I didn't do nearly as much reading as I thought I would on my week off, so I'm actually going to extend this to a third week. I think because it's important and I actually want to finish it, and if I don't, I won't finish it. I'll just jump onto whatever is new. So yeah, Syd Field is, like I said last time, Syd Field is kind of the guy on writing screenplays. I do think his advice is a little old-fashioned, but there is a lot of good things in here, especially when it comes to, the part I'm at right now is character. And I think his approach to character is very good. He describes a lot of ways in which character should interact with his backstory, with the dramatic need and the setting and all those things. Same as a lot of what I've been talking about today. So yeah, Syd Field is really all about structure. Structure is very important to writing. It helps us so much in creating interesting stories. It's also one of those things that's kind of weird because structure is also structure is one of those things that makes movies predictable, but at the same time, movies that don't follow proper structure or good structure tend to be bad. It's a weird dilemma of this is how stories should be told, and good stories are told this way, and trying to break the mold and maybe succeeding, but really not, because again, that's how good stories are told, regardless of the story. It gets weird. But yeah, structure is important. And we're going to be talking about structure super hard next week when it comes to outlining. So yeah. Oh, I totally forgot the thing. So, I will spend a good few minutes now talking about our short story, the one that we started last episode. And how and what are the 5 elements of our short story. There are 5 main storytelling elements, right? So what are those in our short story? Practical stuff. Yay! Yeah. Archetypes versus ingenuity. Yeah, it's a totally hard thing. Because you run the risk of being formulaic, but at the same time, not following the formula to a certain degree muddles up the story and makes it not effective. The same can be said a lot about stereotypes and tropes. And you've probably heard me talk about tropes a lot, but tropes are basically a commonality in the way that we tell stories. Yay! Yeah. So like a good trope, for example, is unobtainium, that fictional metal that everyone's trying to get in the story. Used in James Cameron's Avatar and a 1,000 other things. But yeah, that's a trope. And tropes are interesting because there are forms and there are archetypes, and how you use those tropes can make them either feel bad, or it can make them feel good, or that didn't describe anything. How you use the tropes can determine how tired your story sounds or is, in fact. I'm thinking of a word and I can't remember what it is. Something about adages, tried and true. Damn it. It's something people use a lot in terms of writing. I'm having a day. It's all the heat. It's just melting my brain. Whatever. I'll come back to it if I remember. Yeah, no. Still can't remember what it is. That's bad. Anyway. Yeah, brain is totally melting. Right. What was it talking about? Right. Short story. Go back to the main screen here. So, for us, we have 4 characters. At the moment, we have 4 characters. We have... sorry, no. That's wrong. We have 6 characters. Not 4. 6 characters. 6 characters. And I'm going to open this up in a thing. Yeah, there we go. So, yeah. Leave that synopsis open there. So, elements of storytelling. So characters. Who are our characters? Well, give me a list. Why are you not listing? Weird. That's all. Anyway. Oh, there we go. Weird. So we have the siren. We have the faun. We have the ex-billionaire. We have the killer for hire. We have the goblins. Those are characters. We have the demon. We have the group who's summoning the demon, who we have not defined yet. So that's a thing. We have the king, who's off screen, but he owns stables that the billionaire used to run. So those are our characters. Chat, anyway. That's really fine. Those are our characters. Setting. I need to fix that timer. That's way too long. I need like a 5-second ban. I feel bad now. My bad. My bad. So the setting that I think we should do is a subgenre of fantasy. I think we should do a middle fantasy, almost a mythological sort of style. No, I didn't know that. I'll fix that. Don't worry. A mythological style. So I'm going to describe it as classical fantasy. And this is the I'm not defining the setting per se. I'm defining the genre that the setting's going to be in. So I'm going to write that down as genre. And I'm going to say it's classical fantasy. So middle fantasy, mythological. So our setting is in a kingdom. We know that's a kingdom. We know that there's a waterfall. We know it takes place in winter, which is a time, which is part of the setting. We know that there's stables. What else do we know? Sorry, just checking out my descriptors here. Seeing what we have. I did not bring the mind map in here. I should definitely get a picture of the mind map for this. Mistakes were made. Mistakes were made. So we know that we have these locations. We know that because we're doing classical fantasy, that this isn't going to be a vast, giant world in the way that Lord of the Rings was, for example. This is going to be more of a enclosed style, in the same way that the Greek and Roman myths kind of are enclosed. They take place in one country and a few other surrounding areas, but it's very enclosed. So, for that we know that this is probably some sort of city-state or small country slash island sort of place. If we were going to do it Greek, it'd be very Mediterranean. I don't know if it's going to be exactly Mediterranean because we do have a winter going. So perhaps in a way to sort of make it more interesting for us, it can be more like Icelandic or Scandinavian mythological. Yeah, I'm totally going to just write Icelandic. That's perfect. Right, and I agree with you, Sam. I mean, those myths do take place thousands of years ago, and there's intentional cultural stuff that's being... yeah, I know they're distinct. I know Roman and Greek are distinct. I'm just saying though that they're very insular. That's what I'm saying. Because we were talking about this last time when I said classical fantasy, where it's not medieval. There's not going to be castles and sword fights and all that in the same way. It's going to be more spears and shields. It's going to be more. And I'm doing this very loosely. We're going to make a more concrete setting in the future. But I just want to get some loose ideas down so that we have an idea, so we have a good direction for when we're plotting. Swords and castles. Right? Yeah. And when I think of Icelandic myths, I think of stuff like Beowulf, for example. The cool thing about Scrivener drawing is that I can actually control all of the colors. So the default is not this. The default is something else. I preferred this for many reasons, mostly just because it has a much higher contrast, and it's easier to see on Twitch with the black backgrounds. But yeah, I definitely did a test stream where there was magenta writing on a green background at one point. So yeah. Beowulf is Denmark? Really? I knew it was Old English. Anglo-Saxon. Oh yeah, he's the king of the Danes. Right, of course. My bad. But that's still kind of, well, it's not Icelandic, but it is Scandinavian. So it definitely... I know, I'm so bad at geography. Like, I'm really bad at it. I'm sorry. It's Icelandic. It's Icelandic. And I agree, Johnny. It is super relaxing to look at. I much prefer black backgrounds. It's also more energy efficient. So if you have like a tablet or something to have a black background, it takes less light to illuminate black than it does white. So you can actually save a lot of energy or a lot of battery power by doing that. So I think we have a good foundation there. I need to get a little bit more concrete with it in the coming weeks, but we will. We'll totally do that. We'll come back and we'll take a look at this stuff later, or relook at it. Yeah, I think my chat delay is big again. Yeah. And I know, interesting side note, J.R.R. Tolkien, the guy who wrote Lord of the Rings, was hugely into the Icelandic Eddas. And sort of that style of writing epics. And this short story we're working on is not going to be an epic. That's kind of why I wanted to go more of a middle fantasy. High fantasy tends to be written as an epic. An epic being a certain type of heroic of hero's journey story, usually involving lots of different countries, wars, battles, and vast amounts of geography and traveling and epic adventures. And I agree, Tolkien was a dingus, but he was a good dingus. So yeah, that's what we got for setting. Note to self, remember to do the whole scrolly thing, because people can't read when it's behind your face. So conflict. what conflicts do we have here? Yeah, there we go. Got it to work first time this time. So what conflicts do we have here? Obviously, the Siren wants to stop the ritual. Right? That's a conflict. The Killer for Hire wants to kill the Siren. The Goblin Raiders are searching for the feather. Right? The billionaire lost his fortune. So these are conflicts. These are the main conflicts that are kind of coming out at me right now. I suspect there's going to be a few more, mostly because there are characters like I said who haven't really come into play yet. And we'll once we further define the characters' relationships, we'll be able to pull more conflicts out from inside those. What feather? The Siren's feather. The magic feather. There's going to be a magic feather. It's important to the ritual. I have a whole backstory planned. Don't worry. Don't you worry. And theme. Go. There we go. Separate it a little bit. Cool. Theme. Well, I'm not quite sure what the themes are going to be for this yet. I do know one of the central themes that we're doing right now is we're doing a Faustian style story. So we're going to say Faustian Fall. Faust being a very famous old story about a man who makes a deal with a demon and is forever punished for it. I'm gonna be wrong about this, Sam. I'm sorry. Faust is a German story. Copy link. Boom. The link's in there. It was a German story, but the main literary adaptation of it was Christopher Marlowe, if I'm not mistaken. But I'm probably mistaken, because I'm obviously awful today and my brain has melted. Okay, so I got the first part right. Classic German legend. Alright, points in my favor. The story was popularized in England by Christopher Marlowe. Yes! Yes! Victory! Yeah, and then it was reworked by Gozzi. I don't know how to pronounce that. I'm going to spell it wrong. But yes. We got there. Anyway, there's going to be a Faustian style fall with our with our billionaire. So implied themes because of that are greed is bad. I don't know. That's kind of lame, but it is a thing. Like greed is bad. I think there's gonna be some redemption themes. I'm kind of playing with some interesting stuff for the Siren right now in my head. I took an entire summer of German. I'm not useless. I pronounced Wagner right. Whatever. It's fine. Redemption, blah blah, and protection of the innocents. I think something like that. These are very broad. I'd like to make them more concrete eventually, and we will. Like I said, we're gonna redo this. We're going to redo this in 2 weeks, probably, maybe 3 weeks, give or take. But yeah. So anyway, I'm going to open up the. I just wanted to give kind of a more working example of those 5 elements that I was talking about, so we can kind of see them in action, how they're going to inform our story. And point of view. I actually think that there's going to be several point of views, several characters' point of views in this. I haven't decided what perspective we're doing, like what person we're doing, first, second, or third. Well, we're not going to be doing second. But I think some of the story is going to be told from the Siren's perspective, and I think some of the story is going to be told from the Killer for Hire's perspective. But I don't know how that's going to go yet. We're going to make more informed decisions as we plot it out and see how it goes. So yeah, quick Q&A session. Anyone have any questions for me? Be happy to answer them. Other than that, I will see you all next week. We're going to be doing outlining. And I will be doing rapid updates to the website and my Twitter feed and the Twitch channel and all that with logos and art and cool ass things. So yeah. Any questions, guys? I'm here. You can tweet them at me later if you want. Alright. Well, no questions in the chat. So I'm going to call it a night. It's been 2.5 hours, which is about where I want it to be. So, perfect. Yeah. Thanks for hanging out with me. Bye.